What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, and now we are going to jump over to some X-Factor comics. Now, we're going to cover a two-part story arc that takes place in X-Factor issue number 82 and issue number 83. Now, with this two-part story arc, it is going to be the last video we're going to do for X-Factor before we properly jump into the Executioner song, the next big crossover that we have to talk about on my channel. Now, today's two-part story arc is going to introduce a new team, but for me personally, I felt like Marvel could have done so much more with this team, and this team is called the X-Patriots. Now, before we are able to properly dive into today's video, there are some things we have to talk about. Like, for example, what happened at the end of our last video for X Factor? You see, at the end of our last video, you had this cargo ship arrive in America. Now, we did learn that in that cargo ship, it was a group of mutants who had apparently left Genosha. Now, I'm going to talk more about Genosha here in a moment, but for right now, I kind of want to focus on this group of mutants because they had left their home country and they went to other countries around the world to hopefully find a new home, hoping to have a better life than they did back in Genosha. And so the problem was every other country besides America had told them no. And so when they had arrived in America, they were like, hey, listen, we came here hoping to find a new home. Will you accept us? Now, because the way the actual government system works, what they are doing is the incorrect way of coming into a new country and trying to become a citizen in the new country. And so you have the American government saying, no, you can't just come in like that. You have to leave. But they don't want to leave. And this brings in X Factor. And so while you have the American government right now just waiting outside the cargo ship, waiting for X Factor to arrive, you do have a few soldiers who are there to watch the place begin to talk about the whole entire situation. But while they are talking, they have no idea that they have somebody listening in, and that would be Saran. Now, Saran was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants around this time in Marvel Comics, because around this time, you had Toad say, you know what? Because Magneto nor Mystique is leading their own version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, it gave room for him to finally take that charge and become a leader for once. Because over the years in Marvel Comics, Toad was always Magneto's lackey. And so it's Toad trying his best to make a name for himself. And so for Saran, when he overhears that there is a group of mutants inside that cargo ship, he knows that he needs to call up Toad because those group of mutants might become very helpful for Toad when it comes to building up his actual army of mutants. Now, I want to jump back over to the main base of X Factor because I want to shift our focus over to Havoc and also Val Cooper. And here's the reason why. So for Havoc, he was the actual leader of X Factor when it came to Marvel Comics at this time. And you see, when it came to this version of X Factor, they worked for the American government because the American government's main goal was to build relations with the mutant race. They wanted their own superhero team that was full of mutants. Now, for Val Cooper, she was the liaison. And so for Havoc, the only thing she's really allowed to do is kind of give them missions, and that's really it. And report back to her bosses. And again, that's really it. But you have Val Cooper kind of trying to discipline different members of the actual team. Like, for example, trying to discipline Jamie Maddox for what happened in our last video. Now, in our last video, when it came to Jamie, he kind of fell in love with a mutant and caused a lot of problems for that mission. But honestly, when it came to that mutant, she had the power to play with people's minds when she played music. Matter of fact, check that video out. But when it came to Jamie, he did cause a lot of problems in that town where the mission was at. And so for Val, she's kind of upset. But for Havoc, he says, you don't have the right to talk to my team like that. Like, your only job here is to watch over us, talk to us here and there about some things, and then report back to your boss and then leave. Now, you do have Val Cooper wanting to argue with Havoc, but the phone rings, and that means they have another mission. Now, something else we do have to talk about will be about Polaris. You see, when it came to Polaris, in our last video, she got seriously injured by a character known as Cyber. Her whole jaw was broken. Now, this is her coming home after leaving the hospital, being almost completely healed up. Now, I really want to focus more on Wolfbane here. And the reason why, because you have Wolfbane being very excited to see Polaris. And that's kind of weird. And really, for Peter David, he has been telling us that Wolfbane has been acting weird the entire time. Her emotions are all over the place. But also we know that she has some kind of attraction for Havoc. And really, you have Peter David remind us in this section right here, because with Polaris being home, Wolfbane is really happy, but she's not happy because, oh, Polaris back. She's only happy because, well, Havoc will be happy because his girlfriend is back home. And so for Wolfbane, if he's happy, then she's happy. Now, we do get a page to tell us that the character better known as Shrew was actually able to go through her trial. If you saw our last video, you saw that the character known as Shrew was someone who used to work for a group of characters known as the Hellbells. Now, the Hellbells and also another character known as Cyber used to work for a cartel. Now, here's the thing. When Shrew got arrested, she agreed to turn over evidence against her previous employer, the cartel. The problem was the Hellbells and Cyber and the cartel did not like that at all. So in our last video, they were trying to kill her off. But our heroes, X-Factor, were able to protect her, and she has gone through her trial, and everything's done with this character. And we're not going to see her ever again. But now we can sit down and actually talk about Genosha. Now, Genosha was created by Chris Claremont. It was a country in the world where they were trying to paint this perfect picture saying like, hey, listen, if you come here, it's Paradise Island for you. You'll get everything you need. You'll have no worries. But in reality, if you were a mutant in that country, you were turned into a slave to help build up that country up. And so a lot of times, if you went there and they found out that you were a mutant, bam, instantly you were a slave for that country. But if you were a human, you were good. You had the perfect life in this supposed perfect country. Now, when it came to the X-Men, it did lead into a big event called the Extinction Agenda that involved the New Mutants at that time, X-Factor and the X-Men going to war against Genosha. It was one heck of a crossover, but by the end of that crossover, Genosha was now trying to build up a new kind of country, a new kind of government that will allow both humans and mutants to live in harmony without any kind of idea to turn mutants into slaves. And so when it comes to the x-patriots, the group of mutants who had arrived in America, they have no idea that what happened in their country. They still believe that mutants back in that country are, well, unfortunately slaves. And so when they hear some guy telling them like, hey, first off, you can't stay here. But two, I guess you haven't heard, but your country is actually a better place for mutants now. It got a whole lot better after you had left. But they don't believe that. But then that leads into Toad arriving with his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, for our new characters, the x-patriots, they don't really understand what Toad means as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, especially the word evil, because you have Toad trying to play off the idea like, hey, you guys should join us. Like, we are a cool group. We're trying to do great things for the mutant race. But the whole idea of the word evil is kind of like, I don't think we should actually join you. Now for Toad, he says, listen, the reason we're called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is because, well, the human race looks at mutants as evil creatures, evil characters. And so that is why we say the word evil mutants. But in reality, we're not actually evil. Now, you didn't have Quicksilver arrive. And let's not forget, when it came to the early days of X-Men comics, when it came to the early days of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they were being led by Magneto. And Quicksilver was on that team. And so he knows Toad very well. And like I said earlier in this video, that for Toad, he was a character where most people looked at him as Magneto's lackey or a lackey for somebody else, never that person who was able to take charge. And so for Quicksilver, it's kind of funny to see Toad being that person now in charge of an actual group. But you have Quicksilver believe that he should be able to take down the entire group by himself. Unfortunately, he cannot. But lucky for him, X-Factor arrived just in time to actually help him fight against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, at first, we do see our heroes actually struggling when it comes to fighting against the different members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And really, it's for the way the book continue on and kind of give us a good battle. But don't worry, by the end of the book, or this chapter, our heroes are going to win. But before we are able to actually jump into that winning moment, we have to shift our focus over to Wolfbane, and here's the reason why. You see, for Toad and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they actually first appeared back over in X-Force comics. Now, when it came to Toad's Brotherhood, they fought against X-Force, and you had Sauron kill off Cannonball, quote unquote kill off, because we have learned that there is a possibility that Cannonball is an external. Now, an external is a very special group of mutants that have the ability of immortality. And so for Cannonball, at first, everyone thought he had died, but in reality, he was able to come back to life. But for Sauron in the Brotherhood, they still believe that they had killed him off. And so you have Sauron kind of telling Wolfbane that Cannonball's dead. And for Wolfbane, that's a huge problem because her and Cannonball are very close friends. They were both part of the New Mutants together. And so she does get very upset and tries to literally bite the neck off of Sauron. But he does drop her, and you do have other heroes go out of their way to hopefully save her. Now, the rest of the book is really more of having X-Factor being able to defeat the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. For me personally, they do a better job than X-Force did. But at the same time, for Peter David, he's trying to move on with this actual story arc because they gotta get ready for the next big crossover between all the different X titles, minus Wolverine and also Excalibur. But either way, you do have our heroes being able to easily take down the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, to kind of wrap up the first chapter with our heroes being able to get rid of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, now they can shift their focus over to, well, the x-patriots and what to do with them. Now, like I said, the x-patriots, they don't believe that Genosha has become now a better place for mutants. And so for Havoc, he says, you know what? I got a good idea. X-Factor is going to take you guys back over to Genosha to actually show you guys that yes, it did become a better country. And the rest of the team cannot believe what Havoc had just said. But as we go into X-Factor issue number 83, the opening pages of this book, we do see some members of X-Factor in the X-Patriots being interviewed by some reporters. Now, I kind of want to focus on Lucas here. He's one of the members of the X-Patriots. And the reason why, because, well, Lucas is a telepath. He's able to read your mind, except he can only learn about what your fears are. And then once he does learn about your fears, he's then able to change his body into the things you're actually scared of. So for example, if you're scared of clowns, well, hey, he will change forms into an actual clown that's really scary to scare you. And so for Lucas, when it came to the reporters, he got tired of all the questions that they were asking. And so he changed his form into different creatures to scare them away. But you did have two characters arrive, and that would be Jenny Ransom and Philip Moreau. Now, these two characters were part of the early days of the whole concept of Genosha. Now, for Jenny, at first, she had no idea that she was a mutant, but later on, she had learned that she was. And when she did find out, the government also found out as well, and turned her into a slave. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up because thanks to Jennifer and also the X-Men and Philip as well, they kind of begun the whole change in Genosha. But these two characters, they were able to go over to America and actually stay there. And once you have the different members of the expatriates over here, that these two characters who are also from Genosha were actually able to stay in America without any kind of problem. They want to know what had changed. Now, before we are able to understand what the actual change was, you then have Lucas realize that Philip's last name is Moreau. And the reason why that's such a huge problem is because, well, Philip's father was the man in charge of the entire process that turned mutants into slaves in Genosha. And for Lucas and the rest of the members of the expatriates, well, really just Lucas, he's kind of like, your father is the reason why we had to leave our country. He's the reason why we're trying our hardest to find a new place to live, a better place to live, because your father did some horrible things to us. And so for Lucas, he wants to attack Philip. But shifting our focus over to Wolfbane, we see her inside the cargo ship where we see other mutants who are also brought alongside with the expatriates who are trying to find a new home, a better country to live in. And so you did have Wolfbane run into a statue that looks just like Saran. Now, for Wolfbane, she was able to easily get rid of the statue, but at first she thought it was actually Saran. But once she had destroyed the statue, she realized it wasn't him. But also we learned that that statue was actually created by another mutant known as Taylor. Now for Taylor, he has the ability to make physical flames and turn those flames into statues. And so for Wolfbane, what she saw earlier was not really Saran, it was flames turned into a statue that was created by this mutant named Taylor. Now for Taylor, he's one of the few mutants outside of the actual expatriates group that was brought here to America hoping to find a new home. But for Wolfbane, she kind of wanted to hear his life story, so he begins to tell her. But getting back over to Havoc, trying to convince the rest of the team to go over to Genosha as a way to escort expatriates back there, but to also show the expatriates like, hey, things have gotten better in that country. You then have Val Cooper walk in. And this leads into another argument because for Val Cooper, she still believes that she's in charge of the entire team. And she says, no, you are not going to leave this country to go back to another country without my or the government permission. Now for Havoc, he's kind of like, hey, I'm not going to listen to you at all. But you then have Quicksilver kind of point out the idea that she can never understand what mutants go through because she's not a mutant. Now for Val Cooper, that's not fair because to her, mutants go through the same kind of struggles as regular people do. But in reality, they don't. Now, before this actual conversation go on, you then have Havoc realize something's happening outside the actual cargo ship. And once you have everyone go outside, they realize that Lucas had connected his mind into Philip's mind and turned into the character known as Cameron Hodge. Now remember, Cameron Hodge was this big time character who was trying his best to get rid of mutants across the board. And matter of fact, he was the leader of a group called The Right. But I'm not really going to dive too far into the actual idea of Cameron because he's not really important for today's video. All thing you know is that Lucas did turn into Cameron Hodge when he was that cyborg creature. But after a couple more minutes, you then have Havoc use his powers to knock Lucas back into his regular form again. Now, after all of that, you didn't have Havoc say, you know what, I got the best idea. Let's take the expatriates out into the actual city to kind of show them what America is truly like. Now, for Val Cooper, that is a bad idea. She's kind of like, no, these guys are technically illegal immigrants. You can't just walk them around the city without any kind of problem. But for Havoc, he says, listen, if you try to stop me, I'm going to quit. If I quit, the rest of the team is going to quit. And there goes your X Factor team, a mutant team working for the American government. And so she kind of realized that Havoc kind of has her in a tight spot right now. And so, unfortunately for her, she has to agree and to allow him to actually take the expatriates out into New York to give them a small taste of America. But now we have to jump over to the joke of the book, and that would be Rick Chalker. Now, Rick Chalker was the brother to Vic Chalker, and Vic Chalker was seen in the earlier parts of our coverage over Peter Davis' X Factor. You see, when it came to Vic Chalker, he had a huge hatred towards the mutant race, and he was trying his best to find different ways to actually kill off the mutant race. Now, unfortunately for Vic, he died, and the word of his death got over to Rick Chalker, his brother. And so for Rick, he's trying his best to avenge his brother, even though it was his own brother who got himself killed. It was not a mutant. Either way, for Rick, he had turned his hands into blades, or fans with very sharp blades. And so his goal is to go out there to actually kill off some mutants. The problem is, well, he got himself locked inside his actual lab. And with no longer having a finger to press buttons to get out of the actual lab, he's stuck in there. And when he goes to, give himself a slap in the face for messing up on making sure he had a way out of his lab, well, the blade in his hand cuts his head off. And so he died. So there goes Rick Chalker just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and skip to the end of this book. And the reason why, because the rest of the book is really more just X Factor going out of their way to, show different members of the expatriates what America is like by doing different kinds of activities. But I kind of want to jump back over to Wolfbane, Jamie Maddox, and also Taylor, the mutant that Wolfbane found earlier that has the ability to create physical fire. Either way, when it comes to Taylor, he's in the park trying to create some more statues with his powers, except for the humans in the park, they believe that it's Taylor trying to burn down the actual park. And they also realize that he is a mutant. And so you have Taylor, unfortunately, get beat down like severely beaten by a group of humans. Now, luckily for Taylor, you have X Factor arrive, and they were able to scare off those humans. But the book kind of ends with Taylor just laying there. Now, he's not dead, but he is severely injured. And this kind of ends today's video because the next time we're going to see X Factor, we're jumping into the Executioner song, the huge crossover between X Factor, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and also X-Force. But with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.